My name is Shiri Sher. This is my mother, Geula Vardi. I've been an educator for over 20 years. I worked specifically with youth at risk. We're so honored to be able to be part of this amazing program in claiming identities.
My name is Geula Vardi. I live in Fairlawn, New Jersey. I was born in Tel Aviv in Israel, in a small community. I came from a family of 7 girls and 1 boy. My family came from Yemen. I'm an artist, I'm an instructor, and I'm also running a show about the Yemenite culture.
And when you were young, were you told stories about the old country?
Yes, I actually was fascinated by the story about Yemen and from Yemen. At these days, there was no books, there was no TV, there was no program. So the only things we have is the story and the nature, and it actually helped me very much to be extremely creative. My mom actually brought the whole culture into the center of Tel Aviv. Actually, we lived in a place where Kikar Hamdina is the most prestige community, but my mom had her own taboon that she make her own, and she make her own bread for the family. And she insists to continue her culture, even though we all convert to the Israeli culture. She still remain and insists to stay with her own tradition. The most impact that I have on costume was the wedding, the tradition of wedding, where my mother used to take me to the most condensed community like Rosh Hashanah or Petach Tikva and all those places. There were lots of Yemenite and they were living one next to another. So I used to go for 7 days to stay in the family, sleeping in a corner or somewhere, but we celebrate 7 days of the wedding and there was no catering. People was actually contributing to the wedding. Everybody will bring like mounting of melawach, salufa, all kind of stuff, and everybody was very happy and very giving, and they lived simple but so happy and so excited. So that is something that I took from there. I felt a need to actually find more story. There's so much to tell. There's so much word spread around from everyone. And that's how I decided to capture that story by creating artwork to vision what really was the tradition of the Yemenite culture. And I believe that we need to actually reward this background for every Sephardic Jewish, because yes, there is a lot of story from the Ashkenazi Jewish people, which I love to hear and very touched. But on the other hand, we need to show and tell the story of every culture to make it more rich for our generation to come. So on that, I took my priority to create art, to expose a show, telling the story. Whatever left for my mother, I actually kept it so precious, and I display everything that her culture was about, and shows people how they live. And I saw in my show, people were fascinated. They were like shocked. They were surprised. Where are you coming from? We never heard those stories, you know? So I encourage everybody to go back to your roots.
what made you feel different and what made you feel the same with regard to the different Jewish narratives?
Well, I love the idea of a synagogue and going to shul in America, but all along I felt that I'm outsider, that it doesn't talk to me. The dressing, the hat, the wig, I was like very rough when people were trying to convince me to wear a wig and to dress like the tradition Jewish people. For me, it was nothing to do with what you wear. It's what you are, what your soul, what your meaning. When you go to shul, it's you and God in the community in which you grew up. Were most of the Jewish from similar background to you?
So when I was growing up, I didn't really notice much of a difference because we weren't religious. So I don't think it was as important. But once I chose to become religious, towards the end of high school, I started to become interested in becoming more observant. And when I became more observant, then it became very clear that there was, the Ashkenazi tradition and the Sephardic tradition. And that's when I definitely started to feel that there was a big difference between the two. In the beginning, I mainly adopted Ashkenazi culture. It was only later that I realized that something might have been missing for me. But in the beginning, I was just, exploring those customs. And I think that led me to a lot of exploration of trying to figure that out. And ultimately, it ended up leading me back to my roots and to my traditional, to my actual background. Right now, as I'm working and writing these children's stories and spirituality, I understand just how important that component is, and that it's not really spoken about very much in the traditional mainstream approach to Judaism. And the journey to discovering that, I think, really helped me feel more complete and more whole, helped address what I felt was missing. And it's been just an incredible journey to be able to sort of connect the dots by coming back to my roots and realizing that stories that I had heard from my mother, from my grandmother, about my grandfather being a mystic. I remember some of the stories of him, that the Arabs would line up at his door when there was a drought. Even the Arabs recognized that his prayers were very powerful. I remember stories of, my grandmother and her faith, and how traveling to Yemen, traveling her very dangerous journey, that the only thing that basically carried her was her faith and her connection to God.
Hello, my grandchildren. I'm so excited to tell you the story of my mother, who was a hero. Those are the basketry that my mother used to make in the winter. She even created her own color. And those basketry will be used for so many different kind of occasion. My mother lost her first husband. And the Arab know when they live on the top of the mountain, they can see anything happen beneath the mountain. Everybody lives around the mountain. They saw that there was a funeral. They came in the morning after, and they wanted to take her kid to convert them to Muslim. And my mom was, no. How can she let them leave her house like every mother? So she said she's going to go with them. And what happened, after a while, she was able to escape with the kid, and she started to run away all the way for 1 year. barefoot with 4 small kids all the way until she got to the place where she could be rescued. And one day they were walking in the Valley of Death. It calls the Valley of Death because there were lion and danger monkey. And the kids saw the lion and they were complaining, "Mom, we were so afraid, the lion is around here." My mother said to them, "Don't you worry. Even though I walk in the Valley of Death, I know that God is with me. Never fear."
Did they have instruments? And what type of instruments did they have?
It's so funny that you ask me. The Yemenite have only it calls tabla. It was a metal bucket that they used to tap on it in order for them to create the music.
These things in the beginning that I might not have recognized, left such an impact on me. When I finally reconnected that missing piece, the spirituality, I realized just how important my roots were. I would say that I think that in many ways this book was really very healing for our family, because I think it really represented coming back to our roots and finding the missing ingredient, which we realized comes from our culture, comes from our heritage. This idea of the story came up somehow, and that's when I came up with this idea of telling this story, and then I decided, this is something that we should share with the world, and then I approached my mom to do the illustrations. This is one of the famous illustrations that my mother made. So, what was it like to have to draw the king and a little neshama named Bin?
How do you draw something so powerful and not to insult? I cannot make a picture of God, God forbid. So I was very careful. I was actually fearful when I was sitting in the studio. I made maybe 300 sketching in order for me to come to the one that actually will be a picture of light. That's what I wanted to make, a light of power.
This, innate spirituality, this connection to Hashem, that's the foundation of everything. And without that, it's very hard to really connect to the meaning and the purpose of all the details of the mitzvot. If you don't have that basic connection and basic passion and drive for Hashem. And so it felt like a beautiful closure. Yemenite and Sephardic culture has a lot more spiritual richness to it, and spiritual language, and much more connection to the soul. And that element, I was able to use that as a resource to answer the questions that my children were asking. And I think that not only helped my children, but then eventually to be able to share those stories with other children. I found myself feeling so complete when I was able to take both Ashkenazi culture and the piece that I felt was missing and incorporate the Sephardic culture. It was just so integrating for me and made me feel so whole. And I really hope that the Jewish people will be able to experience that by being able to respect and honor and see the value of each different component.